Welcome to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm your host, Derrick Broze. With every episode of the Activation, we will explore solutions in the areas of health, permaculture, decentralized technology, spirituality, and hidden truths. The Activation Podcast is focused on providing cutting-edge solutions to empower humanity. Welcome, everyone, to the 21st episode of the Activation Podcast. Of course, I'm Derrick Broze, and thank you for being here with me. We are 21 episodes into this experiment that I started in March 2021 after getting sick of just talking about the problems all the times, and I really wanted to focus on solutions, bringing guests and conversations that hopefully get you thinking and give you some tools that you can actually apply in your life. And if you are new to this podcast or you've only caught one or two episodes, I do encourage you to go back and check out the previous 20 episodes, because if my opinion matters at all, I do think that they were pretty interesting conversations with a good range of people. And as I'm preparing for the upcoming episodes, there's some really great guests. I'll just name a few. I'm going to be doing a podcast soon with James Corbett, another podcast with James. I'm going to be talking with Alex Zek. I'm going to be talking with Josh Del Sol, and the topics are going to be extremely interesting, all solutions focused. But, we're never going to leave the solutions focus on this podcast, but I do want to get into some esoteric, abstract ideas that might not immediately seem like solutions to some people, right? Like, it's not necessarily going to be a conversation about growing food, although we are going to have those conversations. It might be something more about, let's explore spirituality and, esoteric treatise and studies from the past and see if they can teach us anything about ourselves and our connection to the divine, stuff like that, right? But I'm really excited to get into those conversations in the coming weeks and months. However, for today's episode, since we're now 21 episodes into this, I figured why not go back a little bit and go to the very first episode. For those who have heard it or listened to it, it is called What is the Conscious Agora? And today's episode is obviously called Where is the Conscious Agora? We're going to answer that question in the next 20, 30 minutes or so here. I won't be revisiting the content from episode 1 to answer the question, what is the Conscious Agora? Short answer, it's a community project, intentional community, eco-village, education center project that I've been involved with since initially starting the idea in 2016, late 2016, 2017, talking about this idea of building an intentional community built around agorism, permaculture, self-ownership, mindfulness, spirituality, bringing these ideas together. And last few years have brought me to Mexico. And in 2020, September 2020, I decided, myself and my partner Miriam, we decided we were going to open this project up to the public. And so many of you reached out, and it's now been 2 years since we first started this project, is at least announcing it publicly. And it's been a year and a half since I first did the original podcast. So why not time for an update, right? So the first podcast, What is the Conscious Agora, goes into the principles behind this project. It tells you the history, my book, and all that stuff. Again, go watch that one, listen to that one if you want that. I'm going to assume you know that information. And if not, well, you should go listen. So it's been a year and a half. And at that time, in March 2021, we had just started the project publicly in September 2020. So by October, November, December, January, February, March, 6 months later, I was doing the podcast talking publicly about the Conscious Agora. And at that time, the people that were involved in that group definitely were more people. There was probably still, I'd say, we started out with hundreds of emails. We narrowed it down to 50 people. I'd say there's probably still in the 20s at that point, mid-20s or so. And then by May 2021, May to July, a group of 14 of us, 14 households, actually put a deposit down on this property that we're trying to get. Still the same property that I'm pursuing. And ultimately, we decided, this basically putting down this money on this property, it gave us 60 days to come up with the rest of the money. So we were all like, okay, we're going for it. Let's do it. Put down money, a little bit of money each. I think it was a $5,000 deposit. We got 60 days to come up with the rest. And if not, then we lose the money we put in. And it was a powerful learning experience, because within those 14 households, we had already done a lot of work together, I would say, from September 2020 to that point. It had been less than a year, and it felt like we'd done a lot of work. Now I realize, looking back, like, wow, we still had a lot more to do. And eventually, as the 2 months were progressing, and as we realized, okay, 60 days, we're going to go forward on this. Well, we had a lot of questions to answer. For one, being the fact that some of our people are in Mexico, some of them are in Canada, some of them are in the US. It was like, how do we transfer all this money to get it down into Mexico? That was one big part of the equation. Another thing is, again, I feel like we had done a lot of work, but once we came down to the crunch of you have 60 days to figure this out, we realized, oh my God, guys, we've sort of abstractly talked about decision making and conflict resolution, and we've pointed at some ideas, but we haven't deeply studied them. And that became apparent as we were just like, because our group was meeting on a weekly basis, and at this time I think we started meeting on maybe a bi-weekly basis, or maybe we went from 2 weeks to every week at that point to like really get things focused. And since then, our group has continued to meet every week. But ultimately, as I mentioned, we realized we had more questions than answers. There was things we still need to figure out, and maybe we could have tried to force it to work, but ultimately we decided, like, okay, guys, let's let this time period pass. So the 60-day period passed, and we don't have the property, right? So at that point, even just those questions that came up, trying to figure out all the things that we had to do, it did cause some minor rifts, I would say, within the group. Some people did leave. I think mostly everybody who has been involved in this project is on good terms, I would say mostly. There's no ill will, and I don't have any ill will towards anybody. Maybe other people have ill will towards me or Miriam, or probably me. But generally speaking, whenever somebody decides they want to go a different way because our vision or our community idea doesn't work, we see that as a positive, because we want everybody to find the home or the idea that's going to work for them, right? I don't want to force it just because I'm friends with somebody in the broader community to say, well, let's all live together, even if maybe our ideals really aren't the same, right? And that's important. So in the end, we let the deposit pass, and a couple people departed, and I think just the whole process, it definitely left some of us feeling depleted or defeated or maybe exhausted. And so we sort of took a break from, we started deposit in May. The date passed in July when we decided to let it go. I think by like August, September, we had kind of like just let things chill. And then around that time, a year ago, Miriam and I were touring the United States, September and October, and we decided to, keep the calls going though with the people that were still interested. And so the group did shrink again, and it went from being the 14 households, I think, one household left and a couple more left. And then it just naturally shrank down to where it is now, where we have, five households that form the core family, and then a couple other prospective households that might eventually join in the long term. And honestly, since that time, it feels like things have grown so much. But I do want to take a moment to, as I'm kind of catching you guys up on the timeline, I want to share some tips. I'm not just this isn't just about, hey, where's the project? The project is based in Mexico, for those who don't know, if you didn't listen to the previous podcast. But the title's more as like, where is it? Like, I'm sure some of you are thinking like, hey, you talked about this. If you listened to me for a long time, I talked about this way back in 2016 in Texas. And if you've been listening the last couple years, I talked about it here in Mexico, and I've been here in Mexico for 2.5 years now. Maybe some of you are, curious. So that's what this podcast is about, is telling you the progress that has taken place since the first episode of this activation podcast, where the Conscious Agora project's at now, and then also to share some of the tips that I've learned, because I see so many people seeking community, and I'm not an expert, but I have learned quite a bit just from being on the ground, trying to do these things, visiting other communities. That's another beautiful thing, is since the first activation podcast, I've got to go visit so many other communities in the United States and across Mexico who are actively living in intentional communities, eco-villages, and are succeeding and have done it different ways, different paths. And so I've learned quite a bit. But in the end, by September, October, we decided to, whoever was still interested, like, let's keep this going. Let's keep the momentum going. And as I said, the group did shrink. And from that point, we still really had a lot of love and excitement about this property that we put the deposit on. So we hadn't ruled it out or anything like that. Although we were still realizing, or we were starting to realize now, hey, our group has shrank. We're definitely going to be short on the money with this smaller group now. When we had a few more members, it was much more plausible. Now we're dealing with less people, less money, obviously. So, we decided let's keep that project in our minds and in our hearts and our, like this is what we would love to happen. But at the same time, let's not just sit and do nothing, because we don't have the funds yet. Let's make, in fact, the idea was, look, we know that we want this property. That's our ideal property. We put down a deposit on it. It didn't pass. The group shrank, but we know that property meets our ideas and our vision in so many ways. Let's keep that in the back of our minds. Let's be open to other properties. Because as I said, I was touring the U.S. in September and October, but earlier this year, in March and April 2022, Miriam and I toured all of Mexico too, and we did get to see other parts of the country, and it's a beautiful country. So we decided, let's keep our mind open to other possibilities, but let's also keep that other property in our mind. While we do that, we started focusing on getting more concrete about the questions that had come up when we were doing the original deposit. Because we realized, look, now the group has shrank. Maybe this is going to make it easier for us to figure out what we already had some core values, but how does it actually work? How does it function day to day, right? And what does that really look like? So with that being said, we started just spending more time having those conversations, talking about, what do we do if there is a conflict? What is our conflict resolution process? And how do we make decisions when decisions involve everybody, right? If you remember from the first Conscious Agora podcast, episode number 1 of the activation, I talked about how we really want to balance individuality and community together. Like, we're all very strong individuals, but we also believe in the benefits of community. So we don't necessarily want to be always like we owe other people. You have to work a certain amount of hours this week or things like that. But we also do want to collaborate and build together whenever possible. And we want to have those benefits. We want privacy. We want community. We want to balance all that, right? So that is still a core value with what we're trying to do. And we had to sit down and think, like, in practice, though, what does that look like whenever there is a decision that's not just, hey, what are you going to eat inside your own home? What are you going to do inside your own property as part of the larger community property? But when it's something that is going to affect all of us, like, hey, guys, we want to bring in a new member of the community, or we want to bring an animal in, that could change up a whole lot. Like, people don't realize quite how much animals, pets, children, these kinds of things really are consequential to the way you interact with other people when living in community. So we had to come up with a process of what does that look like when we need to make decisions. We have a very casual, friendly group that gets along in just amazing way. And so we generally, I don't want to say we all agree on everything, but whenever we're making decisions up to this point, it's been fairly easy, especially now that the group has gotten smaller. Everybody's like, yeah, this is what I think, this is what I think, this is what I think. Okay, what do you guys? We pick one thing and we go forward with it. And if somebody has something to share, they don't agree, they express themselves. But when it comes down to it, the inevitable time which we will reach, where we don't agree on everything, and we have to actually figure out, okay, look, 3 of us feel this way, 2 of us feel this way, 1 of us feels another, and then somebody else is abstaining from the whole thing, right? How do we make a decision in that term? Well, this is where you have to come up with conflict resolution, decision-making processes. Another thing we focused on is entry and exit agreements, right? So what do you do if somebody wants to leave the community, if they want to sell their plot, or if they just want to move out and, sell their ownership to somebody else? Well, you can't just have somebody selling to anybody, because you don't want them to just bring in somebody random who doesn't have the same values as you to your community. So you have to come up with, ideas and guidelines for this. Now, anybody who's ever done this knows, or has even approached this, in any way, knows that you can't plan for every single situation. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to say, well, what happens if this thing? What happens if this thing? No, we're just trying to say, look, inevitably there will be differences of opinion. There will be conflicts. And to prepare for that, we need to have in writing agreements that we've made, that we say, hey, when we reach that position, this is how we all agree we're going to handle that, right? Hold that thought. Hey guys, this is Derrick Broze with the Activation Podcast, and I want to tell you about a new project that I recently launched. It's called the Holistic Self-Assessment Online Course, and it's based on my 2018 book, The Holistic Self-Assessment. Now, some of you guys know that I released this book based off my experiences in prison. This is essentially the culmination of the process I took myself through while I was locked up behind bars, when I began meditating, when I began journaling, and really starting to heal my trauma and begin to align my thoughts, my words, my actions, and really live in line with my true purpose. So this book is meant to be a self-empowerment, self-help guide that helps you align your thoughts, words, and actions, your relationships, your habits, and make sure you are living in line with your goals and your principles. So I developed this 9-week course with the University of Reason, aka Autonomy. We put this course together for people like yourself to take it and walk through it chapter by chapter. I read the book with you. I give you tips and exercises. And there's actually 2 options. If you want to just do the DIY version, you can choose to work through the course yourself. If you'd like to pay a little bit of extra money, you can go ahead and get one-on-one sessions with myself where I will counsel you and work through the book with you and answer any questions you have. So I really want to encourage you guys to check this out. The link will be in the description below where you are listening or watching, and I'll put the link to the Holistic Self-Assessment book as well, which you can download for free. And I want you to stay tuned because we're getting ready to release the Holistic Self-Assessment audiobook, so stay tuned, guys. Now let's get back to the podcast. And I know I said this probably in the first podcast, but the book, Creating a Life Together, which is truly a Bible for intentional communities, says that good documents make good friends, and that's something we really believe in, right? So when we signed when we did the original deposit payment on this property I was telling you guys about last summer, 2021, May 2021 to July 2021, we all signed an agreement together. We made sure it's like, hey, we're all giving this amount. This is what it's about. If we don't go forward, we all agree we're going to lose this money. We're not going to get a refund, et cetera, et cetera. And from the beginning, we had been getting everybody to sign the core principles of the Conscious Agora. And this is something I'm pretty sure I outlined in the first episode. And this is something I recommend to you if you're trying to start a community. Know what the values are, the core principles of what it is you're trying to build. That is so key. So from the very beginning, we had this outline, this vision of the 8 principles, the 8 values that really we were building around. And some of them are more like, I don't know if they qualify as principles per se, but they're like other guidelines. But it started with the core principles that I came up with, which was self-ownership, sovereignty of the individual. That kind of is the cornerstone. And then permaculture, using permaculture in the way we build our food systems, the way we build our buildings, the way we interact with animals and the plant and the environment, etc. And then from there, the third cornerstone would be mindfulness, which is broadly, people who want to keep growing as individuals and keep healing and just, that whole process, right? So those formed the original basis. And then from there, we came up with other ideas like recognizing that we want to be integrated to the local community, right? So we had that as a foundational principle from the beginning so that everybody coming in and wanting to be involved, they know, look, this is our goal. We're not going to create an expat community where we're just in our own bubble. We want to be integrated, right? And then different principles that we, foundational kind of guidelines and principles that we came up with. So we put that all in writing, and every single member of the community was signing that from the beginning. I think we revisited every couple months, but in the end, some of those people that I mentioned that decided to leave after the deposit, some of them would leave because of, I've said before that, our community is not totally vegan, which is still the case. We're not a vegan community per se, but we came to the agreement, the compromise that we won't allow slaughtering of animals on the property, on the land that we all live in. So we're all going to have our own homes and that are a part of a larger homestead that's also going to have an education center where we can teach courses and permaculture stuff and all kinds of cool things I'm excited to share about in just a bit. And the idea is that you can eat whatever you want in your own house. You can go to the butcher down the street or the neighbor, down the way who's going to be butchering chickens and animals and things like that you might eat. But we're not doing that on the property. That was a compromise. And that was something that we made pretty much from the very beginning. And as I said, everybody kept re-signing that document and saying, hey, we all agree on this, right? We all agree on this. But in the end, there were people who felt like, hey, we don't agree on this. And so it's important to revisit these and to make sure we're still on the same page because people's thoughts and opinions might change. And unfortunately, in my experience, some people don't speak up. They, for whatever reason, they just choose not to, or maybe they don't feel like there's a space to. And, if you don't address those things, eventually they're going to come out. But in the end, as I said earlier, we are thankful that everybody finds the community that works best for them. So we love all the people we've worked with and the people who've came to a place where they said, you know what, I don't think this principle or this particular idea works for me. I'm going to go do something else. It's no harm. We want everybody to find what's right for them. And I want to work with people that want to work with the vision that I want, right? So everybody wins if we're all honest and we all communicate openly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we have spent quite a bit since that deposit and since the fall. We were on tour, but we tried to keep up with our community calls. I think we did. And now here we are. Man, it's been a year already. and we're moving along. We've made a lot of progress. The point that our community is at now is we are an idea. We have 5 households, core members. We've come up with a process now, as I mentioned, of how we deal with conflicts. If a conflict arises, these are the steps we're going to take, and everybody signed that document. We came up, we call these our agreement document, Conscious Agora agreement document. So they make agreements that we make with each other about conflict resolution, agreements that we make with each other about decision making, agreements that we make about entry and exit agreements. What happens if a partner or a couple break up and one of them wants to leave and the other one doesn't want to, or vice versa? We just had to come up with ideas. Well, how would we handle that? Or let's revisit this, or let's say that there's this time period to figure things out. You just have to come up with some ideas. And again, know that you're not going to have the perfect solution for everything. But if you put something down in writing that everybody can agree to, it at least gives you a starting point to refer back to when conflicts do arise, or disagreements, or, problems or issues that are just harder to resolve. You want to have that foundation there. So entry, exit agreements, conflict resolution, decision making. And then we also came up with a process, right? Because people are still interested in being a part of this project. Well, how are they going to get involved? We have to show them. We can't just say, okay, you're involved. I mean, we could if we wanted to, but that's not what we do. We have a vetting process. New members come in. We give them basically a survey. They fill it out. We go over it as a group and say, does this sound like somebody we're interested in? Yes, if they are. We have a call with them. We get to know them a little better. And if we decide to proceed from there, we add them to a group, which is like our first stage of getting connected to the Conscious Agora. And we take time getting to know each other. And we revisit that as time passes on to see how we want to integrate people into the project. And so, yeah, we've spent the last year and a half pretty much since I did this original video. Obviously, we did a lot. We did the deposit, and then after that, the group shrank, and now we've been working on all these agreements. And I feel like that side of things is further along than it's been, and more solid. And the group we're working with is really agreeable, good-hearted, good-natured people who I think are just easygoing, and that we can deal with any issues that arise. And if not, we've got things in writing to deal with it, right? So that's where it's at. The land is still there. Me and Miriam have gone and seen other properties around Mexico. As I mentioned earlier, beautiful, beautiful. I could look across Mexico forever and find hundreds of properties that are, perfect. But none of them have really called to us the way this same property has. We keep getting called back to the same part of central Mexico and the same piece of land, and we're really excited about it. We've got to go back there several times and get to meet more of the neighbors and tell them about our vision. We've got to camp on the land, take some friends there, and if you remember from the first Conscious Agora podcast, I was telling you guys, it's filled with fruit trees. There's springs there. The weather's great. I mean, I love it. And we have this vision, and I know that we can make this come to life. And so what we've been doing, to answer where is it, right? I told you all this stuff we've been doing. Now, it's in Mexico, but where's the actual project, right? Right now, the Conscious Agora is just an idea in our minds, in our hearts, but we are going to bring it to life. I'm recording this on October 16th, 2022, and I am making you, whoever's listening, this promise that we are going to bring this project to life. I knew in 2016, 2017, when I first envisioned this, that this would become a thing, an intentional community built around these principles. I thought it was going to happen in Texas, and somehow I ended up here in Mexico. Creator brought me here, and I believe this is where I'm supposed to create this project. And the ultimate goal is that the Conscious Agora is going to be a network of communities. Once we establish this first one, we want to put together how we did this and create a replicable model that can be used everywhere in different parts of the world, that can be a part of the Freedom Cell Network, but also this Conscious Agora network of communities that live in like-minded values. That's what we ultimately want to do. And the other thing is the Conscious Agora, the idea was always that it was going to be a residential village and we'd have a community center to do classes, but now that has taken on even a bigger part of the community, because that's going to be one of the main sources of income. We're going to grow some food, small scale farming, and probably sell to local markets. Most of it will be for us. But our main source of income is going to be using the property. As I said, there'll be a little residential village that the people live there, but we're going to build a structure there, a building that can have several different classrooms in it, so that myself and Miriam and our other community members who have skills and things can have a place to record videos. Like maybe we build a studio, but also you can come to retreats and permaculture courses and getaways. And, I imagine this being like a Freedom Cell Greater Reset boot camp where you can come to our property and stay for a week or 2 weeks, right? And you're going to learn about meditation, different spiritual practices. We're going to do some permaculture teaching, do like a permaculture course or some bioconstruction, and do all kinds of things. And plus be in this beautiful nature and just create more leaders, more motivated people who want to do permaculture and want to focus on the solutions. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. That is what the Conscious Agora is about. And so we have been doing all the things I described. And now at this point, we've created a one-pager that we've started to circulate to some people to get out to potential investors. We're spreading the idea to maybe some of the wealthy people out there in the community, the broader truth, freedom, health community, that if you want to help bring this idea to fruition, reach out to us. But ultimately, and this is a preview of what's to come, we are coming to you, my friends, for support. In the next couple months, we're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign to bring this to life. As I said, we have some of the money needed, but there's still quite a bit more to raise to make this vision happen. And, this is my life. I'm committing myself to using this piece of land, this piece of the earth, to turn it into an education center that we can help children and help families and teach other people in Mexico and people from all around the world, so we can create more centers like this, more holistic education centers, more conscious agoras, more freedom cells, and more healed human beings. So yeah, we are right now, the Conscious Agora crew, our family, our little core family, we're behind the scenes putting together a crowdfunding campaign. We're getting all the details together, and we'll be announcing soon in the coming months. And I will also be talking a lot more about the Conscious Agora, where our project's at, and some other exciting developments at the Greater Reset 4 co-creation in January 2023, January 18th to the 22nd here in Morelia, Mexico. And then, of course, it's going to happen in Texas as well, and for free online. During my talk at the event, I'll be talking more about this, and you're going to hear more about this crowdfunding campaign and our effort to bring this to life. So where is it at? It's in our hearts. It's in our minds. It's in Mexico, and it's coming very soon. I know we are going to be able to create this and do something so beautiful, and I honestly couldn't do it without you. So to all of you who watch my content and truly get the message of the conscious resistance and understand what this is about and the world that I'm trying to contribute to, about exiting and building from these slavery systems and choosing to put our energy, our time, our money, our blood, our sweat, and our tears into building new systems, I hope to do this with you. I look forward to co-creating communities around the world with all of you, and I'm excited to share what we're going to do. And the cool thing about this is, as my life switches to that direction, guys, the next couple of years after we get the land, a lot of my content, I'm still going to do journalism, but it's going to be documenting the process of here's how we're building this, here's how we're creating this, and I'm so excited to share that with you guys. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. This has been the 21st episode of the Activation Podcast, and I hope that you guys will, go back and watch the first episode if you haven't. If you made it this far and you want to know more about the details of the project, also you can go back and read about the Conscious Agora in my book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, which is the third book in the Conscious Resistance Trilogy, which you can purchase everywhere books are sold. So thank you guys so much for your time, your attention, for supporting me. And until next time, stay tuned for more exciting episodes of the Activation Podcast. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace. You have been listening to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find the archives of our show at Pinecast, Spotify, and theconsciousresistance.com. Thank you for listening.